All right. We are so excited to be able to present to you this discussion. Julie and I have been very thoughtful, very diligent on how we wanted to approach this topic. You know, employment is such an important but sensitive topic because it's very personal to everyone. Everyone kind of has their own journey because, as you've heard, so many people are affected with LH1 at different parts of their life. I was 26, but we just heard Linda that's 59. There's so many people that we're in different journeys, and whatever kind of works best for us and our families and things that we need to take in consideration is really important, especially when thinking about employment. Last year, I had the wonderful opportunity to have host and moderate our very first employment panel that Julie was on. And one of the biggest takeaways that we heard was that there is so many options. And I think that's really important to be able to bring back to conference this year, is to talk through the options, hear and educate ourselves with the resources, hear other people's stories, learn what works for other people. And knowing that in each one person's journey is different, it's going to be really nice because I think we can all resonate with someone's journey being told today. So we're really excited to be able to kind of pull this together. We're going on the same kind of vibe of being part of the entire audience. So we'll kind of talk with different people throughout the audience of their experiences, their stories. Each person has like a little tidbit of information to be able to share, which we find will be very valuable for you to learn from. So without further ado, let's get started, Julie.
Yeah. Hi, so I'm Julie Poincenot, as Jessica mentioned. And just to go along with what she said, I actually think one thing my mom said today that was really great was people that lead successful lives. So I think to Jessica's point, we're not just discussing full-time employment. We're not just discussing, like whatever someone sees as correct or the right way of doing things. There are so many ways to live a successful life, even after, being affected by LHON or supporting people. So just that's the idea of this entire session, is sort of being able to hear from different people, knowing where you are and taking something from that. So
I think just to add to that, Julie, like when you said success, like success means so many different things to different people, and like what's fulfilling and what kind of like gets you pumped up to go to work or go do something that day, whether it's volunteer work or whatever it is. I think that's kind of like the definition to throw out there, is like success means something different to me than it does to you, to somebody else in the audience.
Absolutely. So, and with that, again, some of these specific people came from questions. So just know that, again, a range of topics will be covered, but we will also try to have some Q&A at the end. So if a question comes up in your head, just know that at the end we'll have some time. And, the Q&A is not meant to be just for the people that spoke. It's possible that you have a question for anyone in the room that could be answered. So keep that in mind. So with that, Jessica,
let's get started.
I would love to know, do you know anyone that's used maybe like government assistance or has maybe been guided through the process? Because I truly don't know, and actually don't really know how people do that.
And like what kind of types of jobs do people that work for government, like federally funded programs, do?
Yeah, like what is that? How does that happen? How do you find that?
It's a great question. However, I know that Greg Ramsey does know. So Greg, kind of walk us through. How great is that?
Thank you for that question. I'm currently with the Defense Logistics Agency. It's part of the Department of Defense. And being that I'm a federal employee, so I started my journey about 7 years ago, re-entering the workforce, and I pursued federal government as my option. I wanted to pursue something that I felt would be seeking people with disabilities, and I thought the reasonable accommodation process would be a better situation. So that was my choice that I made. You can choose as you wish. Some people I know have very successful stories in the private sector, but I'll be giving one more about the public sector today. There's a couple different things I want to hit on, particularly with the federal government. The first thing, I think, if you're going to know anything about federal government opportunities as a person with disability, the federal government has Schedule A hiring authority. That is where they can hire people with disabilities non-competitively to fill employment opportunities. So this is something, if you're seeking that, you should definitely be taking advantage of that. It is an added benefit that can help you get hired, that can help you fill positions. Any position for the federal government you can find on usajobs.gov, and you'll see on different jobs, there's different hiring paths or authorities they can use to hire people. There's a particular one that says Schedule A hiring authority for those type positions. Those are positions you can apply for as a person with disability. You can go on opm.gov to find example Schedule A letters. They need to be provided by either a certified medical professional, certified rehabilitation professional, or a federal state agency that provides benefits to people with disabilities. But that letter will help you, give you an advantage to being hired, especially in a non-competitive fashion. There's a couple other programs I would definitely hope you'd be aware of when you're seeking federal employment. If you have not heard, there is something called the Ability One program. That is a program that the federal government uses to try to get people with disabilities jobs. Now, they typically federal agencies will work with nonprofit agencies that hire people with disabilities in different type professions. For example, when I came into the federal government, I got into acquisition or contracting. The Ability One program does have a contract management services as part of their professions that they're trying to help people with disabilities with. So I started out as a contract closeout specialist with the Cincinnati Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. We called that CABV for short. And that's how I got my foot in the door and eventually received a permanent federal position after I acquired experience as a contract closeout specialist. You work with the systems that the government uses. You can network and meet other people. So it's a great way. And there's other, like I said, other positions in the Ability One program. It's a great way to find employment, work with a nonprofit agency, and gain some federal experience that'll help you land a federal position. The other program I definitely want to hit on before I leave you all today is something I'm going to actually be trying to volunteer for later this year to give interviews to people with disabilities that are in college or recently graduated college. It's called the Workforce Recruitment Program. Now, that is a program between the Department of Labor and the Department of Defense where they're trying to connect different agencies in the federal government with people that are in college or recently graduated, people that can qualify for a Schedule A letter, so a person with disability. And so they have informational interviews, and then at the end, you're entered to a database that connects you with the agencies, can connect with these people to interview them for employment. So that's something I'm going to be interviewing later this year, or volunteering for. They work directly with the schools or the universities that you're a part of if you are in college or recently graduated. So those are different benefits. Overall, I would like to just also let you know, I'm very proud of my federal experience. My story is that I lost my vision in 2006, graduated from high state in 2010, but then I spent about 7 years at home struggling with some of the things that we're talking about today. And once I got the ball rolling with the federal government, I've been very pleased with the leadership, with opportunities, with accommodations. I have been able to make several career jumps with different benefits and opportunities. I enjoy my work. Once again, I know this is a personal anecdote, but I find the work fulfilling, and I think it's a great opportunity. They're seeking people with disabilities. You can use some of these benefits and get your foot in the door and get some experience. And overall, I think it's a great career. And I've even was lucky enough, blessed enough to receive a different award. They have different award programs, Department of Defense for outstanding employees with a disability. There really is great potential, in my opinion, both as a good job, but even as a career for a person with disability. So I think federal government's a great opportunity. I would encourage it. And if you have any questions later on in the session or after, feel free to ask. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Like, how cool is that? Not only did we hear about resources, but also opportunity. And I love it. Thank you so much, Greg. Also, I don't know if anyone noticed how well Greg just spoke. He also is in Toastmasters. And I think it's one of the coolest plugs I'm going to do right now is that your public speaking is fantastic. And it's such a cool thing. Like Toastmasters, I did it personally, makes a huge difference just to speak confidently, slowly, which I don't do, but also in front of a group. Like, Greg, do you think that's made a difference as well?
I would also encourage that very highly on two different levels. One, yes, there is a lot of people that have some issues with public speaking or maybe have some fears, but that means it's a great way to stand out, especially if you're looking to move forward in an organization, especially in today's world, you'll find if you have public speaking or leadership skills, leadership training, those kind of things help you stand out. I would highly encourage them, especially if you're wanting to move up in an organization. These are great ways to stand out. And in my opinion, you do not need eyesight to speak well. So this is a great tool to practice to help you stand out in a different way. And the second part of that would be that Toastmasters and joining extra organizations in general, I would highly encourage, at least I'll speak from my government experience, going in places or being uncomfortable. This is where you learn and add skills, and definitely different organizations or committees. These are ways where you end up finding that you end up networking with different people, and it's such an undervalued bonus that people do not take advantage of. Networking, especially in a larger organization, if you end up networking with people outside your team, you join a committee or maybe learn different skills that you grow from. These are all things, if you're especially wanting to climb different jumps in your organization, that I would consider extremely advantageous and can help you in your career.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. That's awesome. Such good information. And didn't you guys just love that he just said that with Schedule A, it actually is a bonus that we're visually impaired to get that job? So that's awesome. Sometimes it's not as easy, but it's such a great opportunity. So thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey with that. One of the biggest things that I think is really important, Julie, is training, right? Like computer training, assistive technology, like cane training, just like all those things. But I think training is such a big thing. Like, what's your opinion on that?
Oh, absolutely. I especially like when you go to lose sight. So I think to Greg's point, like being able to practice speaking is amazing. Also, that is so awesome that you volunteer and help people. So that's so great. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think especially everyone here obviously is kind of wondering like, how do you train on like how to get back to work, or what do you do? Where do you turn? So I definitely think it's a great thing to understand, and like what are resources?
And especially like confidence, right? I think like that's, yes, we learn skills, we learned different things through training, but a lot of it's confidence. And especially with Toastmasters, especially with different things, like I need to feel confident that I can use a cane. And so I take O&M training. I need to feel confident to speak in front of an audience. So go to Toastmasters. But I'd like to go to next to Lucas, and he's actually going to walk us through his training that he had at the NFB Center and how that kind of helped him and learn and grow.
I lost my vision in 2006, and I went to the Louisiana Center for the Blind. It's one of the National Federation of the Blind training facilities, and it's different than other training facilities, where other training facilities focus on using your vision. And the National Federation of the Blind, they use what are called learning shades or sleep shades, and they kind of equal the playing field for people who are going to lose their vision or who have already lost their vision. So it just kind of equals the playing field, and it allowed me to, it helped me with my disability identity formation. So when I became disabled, I struggled to identify as a person with disability. The disability is kind of invisible. I have a choice to hide this or not. And when I went to the state ran training facility for an assessment, I went to the Cleveland Site Center for an assessment, and they thought that I would only need 6 weeks of training to be a strong enough platform to go out onto the world and find competitive employment. That wasn't enough for me to feel confident to walk into a job opportunity and to say that I've learned Braille, computer skills, O&M skills, and all of these skills, and now I'm supposed to walk into in 6 weeks, walk into a job and start the rest of my life. That didn't sound like the most appealing situation for me. So the National Federation of the Blind, their training facility was 9 months, and it was a similar skill set, but what stood out was that they wore learning shades, and it allowed me to just be more comfortable with my blindness. I was able to overcome challenges and find a stride after overcoming those challenges in a stride of success. And then I was, almost proud, or I am proud to be blind. And in the training facility, they have a different philosophy than other training facilities. Their philosophy is, that we are first-class citizens and that we, one of my favorite speeches from the NFB is the left-handed dissertation, where it kind of compares blindness to a minor nuisance or being left-handed. And, it explains that the world is built for right-handed people. There's butter knives that are built for right-handed people, scissors, school desk chairs. That's just a minor nuisance. And I think that I've adopted that philosophy that my blindness is just a minor nuisance. And it's allowed me to walk into job interviews with more confidence, and to say that, I'm employable. And I think that that's important because people with disabilities they face more social anxiety in situations. And, we already face environmental barriers and situational barriers, and, low expectations are our biggest barrier. So if we, as people with disabilities, can, have self-confidence and not let other people's low expectations be that barrier to our dreams and success, then, that's more likely to happen with training and in an environment where you can grow. What all stands out for me is that by the end of that 9 months, I was able to be a role model for other people who came into that program. And I don't think I could have done that in 6 months, been a role model for other people. And I think that was really important for me by the end of the 9 months.
Lucas, I loved that. I loved all of it. I love that that you walked out of 9 months later and you were a role model. I love that there was so much to be able to learn within that time, and agree, like, right, Julie? The amount of time it takes is different for everybody. And I think that's so important that you recognized that, like, what you needed was more and you advocated for yourself. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And I think it's just so helpful to understand. I think for everyone, again, in the room, it's like good to know that there are these people who have gone down these different paths. And I think everyone's path or way is a little different, but if you can kind of find what feels right for you, then you can sort of go that way. So, on that topic, I think resources, knowing that these are available, super, super important. There's some resources that I know very little about. I know you've had a little more experience in the world with there's short-term disability and social systems that are very confusing.
So I would say so confusing, but also I learned the hard way. I learned the hard way by doing things wrong and having to owe back money, or being on disability and not knowing the parameters or the rules. It was not the right way.
So I would like to introduce our next participant. So Jerry is not an expert, but a resource. So we really appreciate Jerry's going to assist us all in kind of understanding a little more about all of these systems, and also just act as someone that we can ask questions to.
Well, as you all know by now, I'm Jerry Laurie, and I am not an expert in Social Security. I'm going to apologize for two things, one of which I'm going to have to read some of my information because the numbers are very specific with Social Security, and even the phraseology of some of the wording for applying. And I'd also like to apologize to the people who are going to be looking at my back through this. So, why am I qualified to talk to you a little bit about Social Security? Most of what I have learned is from writing the financial guides that Molly Garone spoke about earlier. We write them, we update them, which means that not only do we have to know what Social Security was like when I wrote it 5 years ago, but we have to keep getting them updated. So I spend a lot of time on the websites and talking to different people. So there are two types of Social Security relating to disability. There is Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI, and there is the Supplemental Social Security Income, or SSI. SSDI that or the Social Security you're probably most familiar with, or that you think of when you think of Social Security, is most similar to SSDI. That means you work for a job where you pay into FICA, and that shows up on your pay stub. Some of our jobs do not actually pay into FICA, mostly government jobs that have their own pension system. But if you are working for a job that pays into FICA, the general theory is at a certain age, if you've earned a certain number of what they call credits, then you are eligible for a Social Security pension, a certain amount every month. You earn those credits generally it's a combination of the amount of money that you're earning and how long you work. For most people, you can qualify for Social Security at the appropriate age if you've earned 40 credits, and 40 credits usually equates to 10 years, because in most cases, full-time employment earns 4 credits per year. If you develop a disability, you still need to earn 40 credits, but they don't do it the same way. They don't count it the same way. There is there's a sliding scale, and I would need a whiteboard and a calculator to explain it to you each individually, because it changes based on your age and the amount of credits that you had previously earned prior to your disability occurring. So for instance, if you are younger than 28, they call it a duration test, and it's 6 credits, or you need to have earned a year and a half of credits. After that, it follows the formula I spoke about. The other thing you need to know is that you have to be determined to be disabled. There's a lot of information around that, but just know that legal blindness counts. So let's say you've figured out that you qualify, or you're pretty sure you qualify. Now you have to actually apply. That's the hard part. There's very lengthy forms. There's multiple ways to apply. You can apply online. You can apply via a phone interview. You can apply via an in-person interview. My recommendation is to try online first, because you don't get very far before you realize you need a lot of backup supporting information. And you might not have that all at your fingertips. So if you apply online, you can leave, come back, do that kind of thing. So you have time to get it all together. You will also have to sign waivers that say it's okay for Social Security Administration to reach out to your doctor and verify your disability. And there'll be some back and forth. Usually it's unusual that it all goes through perfectly the first time. After that, you're going to get a letter, and it will say that you've been approved. And then you typically need to wait 5 months before receiving your first SSDI payment. That means your initial payment generally arrives in the 6th full month after the date your disability began. So these are not things you want to dawdle on. Okay, so now you've qualified, you're getting your payments, and lucky you, someone just offered you a job. What happens now? There was a concern within Social Security that people would just not take the job because it was so complicated applying. Why would you do that if the job didn't work out? You'd have to start all over again. So there is a program, and it is called the trial work period. So what that means is you can work for at least 9 months after you get your full disability payment. And that is called the trial work period. In 2024, any month you earned over $1,110 before taxes counted towards that trial. Then, so 3 months, maybe that wasn't long enough. You're still waffling. You get a 9-month work trial. No, I'm sorry. After your work trial, there is a 36-month period called an extended period of eligibility, or EPE, where you can work and still get disability payments. The EPE earnings limit in 2024 for blindness was $2,590. If you exceed the earnings limit in any month, you're not eligible for disability payment for that month. After your EPE, if you keep earning over the limit, your benefit will typically end. And this is a tricky part, and Jessica alluded to it a little bit. It's your responsibility to tell Social Security. It's your responsibility to tell them that you are now working. They do go out from time to time and they check. And if they have determined that you are getting payments that you are not owed because you are now working and you're now exceeding the maximum, they will send you a demand letter and you owe them the money. And it can be a lot of money and it can be hard to come by. So you need to pay attention to that. That is really critical. So unlike SSDI, which is based on work experience, Supplemental Social Security Income, or SSI, is a program based on need. So eligibility for SSI does not depend on whether you worked and paid into the Social Security income. In order to qualify for SSI benefits, both your income and resources must be below certain dollar amounts. Currently, the income dollar amount is $1,971 per month, and resources below $2,000 for an individual. It does change for married people and people with children. So the maximum federal SSI benefit tends to adjust yearly. Right now, for an individual, it's $1,451. And much like SSDI, you can apply same way, online, phone, in person. But if you think you qualify, don't wait. The earliest they will pay SSI is the month after the filing date of your application, or the month after you first met all eligibility requirements, whichever is later. And just like SSDI, if you're getting SSI payments and you go back to work, you must let them know. You will also get a demand letter at some point in the future, and you will also be required to pay the money back if you haven't let them know ahead of time and you have taken the funds. So there's another program run by Social Security, and it's geared for people seeking employment or trying to stay employed. And this is a cool program. It's called the Ticket to Work. Everyone aged 18 to 64 who receives SSDI or SSI is eligible to participate, but you don't have to. It is free and purely voluntary. So Ticket to Work offers training, career counseling, job referrals, and other services to help people with disabilities enter or return to the workforce. Private employment networks and your state vocational rehabilitation agencies are working in conjunction with Social Security Administration to provide those services. So that's what I was going to say about Social Security, but I've also been asked to cover a couple of things because this is work on short-term and long-term disability. So not all states offer short-term disability leave, but some do. Usually employees fund the short-term disability program through payroll deductions. The amounts vary by state, but generally you're entitled to 60 to 70% of your wages for oftentimes 52 weeks if your state has a short-term disability program. Regardless of whether your state offers short-term disability, if you work for an organization, or you did prior to your disability, that had more than 50 employees, you're eligible for the Family Medical Leave Act, or FMLA is what most people call it. It requires covered employers to provide up to 12 weeks off in a 12-month period for the employee's own serious health condition, or for those cited supporters out there, to care for a family member with a serious health condition. That leave need not be taken consecutively. So maybe you have to take son, daughter, husband to the doctor. You should be able to do that under family medical leave. That counts as 1 day of your family medical leave. An employee, the FMLA also states that an employee must be returned to his or her original job or to an equivalent job with equivalent pay, benefits, and other terms and conditions of employment. Employers are also required to continue group health insurance coverage for an employee on FMLA leave under the same terms and conditions as if the employee had not taken leave. And finally, there's long-term disability. Long-term disability insurance is private insurance that protects an employee from loss of income in the event he or she is unable to work due to illness, injury, or accident for a long period of time. Many larger employers offer long-term disability insurance as part of an employee's opt-in benefit package, or you as an individual can purchase it as a private policy. If your state offers short-term disability insurance, long-term disability usually activates when short-term runs out. But long-term disability policies can have what they call offset language. So for example, a policy may require an employee to get Social Security disability insurance, and then they reduce the premium they're paying or the benefit they're paying you by the amount that Social Security is paying you. But each long-term disability policy has different conditions for payout, diseases, or pre-existing conditions that may be excluded, and various other conditions that make the policy more or less useful to you as an individual. I urge you to keep in mind your family's health history, your health history of any diseases, including LHON, especially if you're a carrier. Long-term disability could be your friend in the long run. Thank you.
Jerry, thank you so much. Clearly this is a little like, not exactly employment, but I think for so many people, this is such a huge question mark that is terrifying to even start going down a rabbit hole of understanding. I thank you. That is so much information. That is so helpful. And I just think, again, like not an expert, but a huge, huge, huge resource. So
huge resource. And if you feel like your mind might have been blown a little bit, this meeting's being recorded. And so definitely come back and visit that, because that was like a really valuable,
so much information.
8 minutes.
There's
Wow.
so many details. Thank you. So again, I mean, I think that's where it's also important to understand for us, like what, everyone has a different path, and knowing that these paths are available is key. And knowing where to look for these resources is super important.
And I think it's like tools in your tool belt, right? Like as you kind of hear all these different stories today, like keep these kind of stories and resources. And I mean, everyone's kind of shared a resource in your back pocket. Things change, people change, life changes. Like everything is just really well to be. We're here to really make sure that you're as educated and knowledgeable as possible. And I think that's through the beauty of our amazing community. So I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And exactly to the point of like, everyone's path is different, to your point, different times, different things are right at the right, like different times. So thank you so much. Okay. So as we move along, for some people, staying employed where they are is the right move for them. So we're going to continue on and talk about a couple of people and just the environment that they worked in. I think it's kind of interesting to hear, again, like what are people doing? How did they do it? And how did they get through it? So we're going to pass it off to Jetta, who's going to tell us a little bit about her journey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jetta Hall. I'm all the way in the back for anyone. I'm way in the back here. I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and I work for the University of Louisville in the Office of Admissions as their unit business manager. I do a number of things from HR related to payroll to helping coordinate a building renovation. So my journey with vision loss started 5 years ago. And at the time I had been in the role that I'm currently in for only 3 years. My story is much like everyone else's. I'm losing vision rapidly. I'm still working. I'm thinking, I need to quit my job. I can't see anymore. This is it, right? I'm going to end. I had some good advice from Melissa, who said, well, if you think you can keep going, try, at least give it a try. So I kept going. I kept trying. I reached out to a vocational rehab center and I went through that process. They didn't want to accept me at first because I still had a job. And they were like, well, we are for people who don't have jobs. And I said, I know, but if I don't get the rehab, I will lose my job. And then I will be right back here in front of you. So after some time, they decided, okay, we'll let you in. I did basically a 2-week boot camp and tried to get all the information I could. I walked away with a CCTV and other equipment that just helped me continue on in my journey. I think the biggest thing that was important for me is, at least in my situation, I knew that if I stopped, I would just crumble. So my goal was just to keep moving forward. I remember my boss saying one day, do you think you should take some time off? Do you just want to, be at home for a while? And I was like, no, I think if I just keep pushing forward, I can do this. So with the help of the vocational rehab center and then just relying on the people around me who were offering me help, it's amazing if you start to tell your story and your journey, how many people will come to you and be like, well, I can certainly help you with that. It was the little things like I went up to the printer and I was like, I don't even know how this works anymore, and it's just being able to rely on the students and my coworkers around me that were offering me the help really, really helps my journey continue. And I was lucky enough to keep my job, and I've been there for 8 years now. I was honored enough to be nominated for the Presidential Outstanding Performance Award in March and won the award and was able to go to the ceremony and celebrate with all my coworkers. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And it was funny, my husband, we were reading through the nomination letters and he was like, it's interesting because none of the nomination letters spoke to my vision loss. It was almost like that was a blip on my radar. It just, my husband was saying that really spoke to the work I did for the university and my passion for it. So, it was a really exciting year for me and I'm just happy to be where I am. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but go Cards.
Thank you so much, Jetta. That's awesome. And congratulations. Very happy for you.
Yes, congrats. I love that they didn't talk about your vision at all in that letter.
I agree. Yeah,
cool.
because it's like, that's maybe a part of you, but that's not how you're defined. So that's awesome. Okay. And then, it's funny, in a very similar timeline to Jetta's, we have Megan, who lost sight kind of around the same time, but Megan was actually working remotely well before everyone started working remotely.
Yeah. So I was working in New York. So to take a step back, I've been affected 5.5 years and I've been working for the same company for 13 years. I work for one of the largest beverage distributors in North America, and I was an executive assistant. So I don't know if you've seen Devil Wears Prada, but that was my life. So at the same time, my husband got the opportunity to move to San Francisco. I didn't have an office there, so I had to ask to work remotely. So I had to do my technology training. So take a step back, I was then affected a year later. So I had to do my technology training and keep working. From there, we moved back to New Jersey after my training, and we learned what my reasonable accommodations were. I don't go on Zoom, or I don't go on video when I'm on Zoom calls. I don't want anyone to see my forehead because that's all that they would see. I work remotely still, even though I'm back in New Jersey near the New York office. That's my jam. What else? And I don't let people tell me what I can't do. Don't assume that I'm blind, so I can't do something. Don't tell a blind girl that. So this is what I'm doing now. Might not be what I'm doing in a year, might not be what I'm doing in 5 years, but I guess the moral of my story is reasonable accommodations are pretty basic. So ask for what you need.
That's great. Thank you, Megan. Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think it's really interesting to kind of hear how people have been able to do it in totally different environmental situations. And, again, everything is human specific. So if it works for you, that's great. If it's not for you, that's okay too. So finding what, fits you is so important.
And I think also Megan touched on advocacy, like being able to advocate for yourself of like, what accommodation do you need? You're not going to tell me what I can and cannot do. And being able to obviously like navigate that through the workplace it's so tough.
Takes time too, because I think especially in the beginning, you don't want to, I don't know, bother people, like kind of like Jetta said, I feel like if anything in time, you're like, nope, I need you to help me with this. And people are like, no problem. Like happy to, if you tell me what you need, right? Like,
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like I feel like it's been, I mean, I've been affected for 12 years, and I feel like it took me years to get to the point to be like, hey, is there any way that you could help me with this? Or like, actually, can you do this instead? Or,
and as soon
you
as
know,
you ask, sure, like,
yeah,
no
that's
problem.
so easy.
Yeah.
But it took that confidence that we keep kind of hearing about to be able to ask that question.
Absolutely. Completely
It's
agree.
like, yeah. So, but Megan, thank you. That was awesome to be able to kind of pull that in.
Yeah.
So I think also it's the people you surround yourself with, right? Like, I mean, just kind
Clearly
of
look in this room.
right. Yeah, exactly. Like I think about the your kind of journey that you shared last year and like having a supportive and work environment, coworkers, boss, people that really kind of understand what you need, but also kind of still give you that respect, like Jetta had said, as you're productive, successful employee and you're just doing your thing. However, it's also whether it's your spouse or your parents or friends, it's all about who you surround yourself with. And I think that's important no matter what, in and out of the workplace. But I think that's something that we have to also kind of remind ourselves that like this is our tribe. These are the people that we need to surround ourselves with to make sure we stay fulfilled, successful.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I think we'll kind of shimmy over to Terry's story next. And I think what I love about Terry's story is that he found his tribe. Like he knows his tribe. He knows what makes him successful and happy and productive. And there's so many things that are important for you to share, Terry.
I was affected 6 years ago, and I worked at like a mom and pop repair shop since I was in 11th grade. So I was there like 15 years when I became affected. And then like 6.5 years ago, Danny and I had moved to another property, and there was a pretty big building there for potential to maybe work out of. I'm like, oh, maybe someday I'll have like my own deal. Well, like 5 months after we moved in is when I became affected. And I was like, well, that kind of changes things now. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. And I was still working at my shop and ever since, or at the business I worked for. And my boss just never seemed to pick up on it from the beginning till 4 or 5 years in. Things just didn't really seem to change a lot. Like my coworkers got it pretty well, but like I'd walk into the office and be like, "Where's he at?" And he'd be like, "Oh, here I am." And then he'd ask me to go find a crack in a flex plate or something. Like I'm like, "How am I going to see that if I didn't see you?" So just never really picked up on it. So there was good days and there was bad days. Like some days just everything went well. Like it was all stuff I could do. The next day it was like, obviously I'm not going to be able to do this, you know? So time went by, and also at that point too, Danny started her job, and our work were real close to each other, and we started at the same time. So it just kind of worked out. She'd drop me off like 10, 15 minutes early, and I'd just hang out till work started. She'd get to work, and that was fine. Well, then later she changed jobs and they weren't as close. So she was starting an hour or two later than me. So it was more on her than it necessarily needed to be. She was getting up earlier than she had to. And then she was running to me to work, and then had time to kill in between, whether just to come home for a little bit and then leave again, or just run around if there was any errands she needed to do. So as time went by, then I ended up going part-time for a year, and then I just decided to leave altogether. Like it was mutual between us. We talked about it, and it's just less stress on both of us. And now I just kind of do it as a hobby. Had friends, like one buddy for like a year and a half just came over every morning, was like, "I'm here for whatever you need me to do, like help with stuff, run you somewhere, whatever." And that's just kind of what I do now. And it works out. Like I still do the car stuff as a hobby, or if there's other stuff we need to do, like I have time to do that, and just kind of works out. So that's where I'm at as of right now.
Thank you, Terry. I love that. I love so much about Terry's story as I have like the goosebumps talking about it. I love so much about it and the fact that like things change, life changes, and you really have to take care of you and your family and what's best for your family. And oh gosh, I love that you have a buddy that pops by every so often and says, "What can I help with?" I totally have a friend that does the same thing, and it means the world. So I think that's so great. It's surrounding yourself and doing what's best for you and your family. That's great. Thanks, Terry.
Totally. And I think it's like, kind of like we said, there's so many ways to live a successful life. That sounds so successful. And I love the friend. I love your friend. And of course, Danny, but you too. But I love that story. I love those kind of people. So, and also just like how you work on cars. blind is amazing. So I think it's actually really cool to kind of hear, again, just totally different lifestyles and people doing all sorts of things with our vision. So someone else we're going to share is Chris, who is going to explain to us how he works in a different location all the time. So Chris, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello. Hi, I'm Chris Lawton, and I've been affected since 2007. And I'm talking about how I get around. Yes. So I work for the city of Recon Park in San Francisco, and my job requires me to be at different park locations. One, I commute into the city, and I need to get around to different locations. And maybe in the past that was a lot more challenging, but with technology, I rely on a lot. I'll put my destination on my phone and listen if I need to in my ears. There's a lot of great transportation options in where I live, so that helps me, whether it's train or bus or walking or Uber or Lyft. I felt like when my vision first was gone, I you have this like, what am I going to do? I can't do anything. Can't go anywhere. I have no independence. And really, all the speakers I've heard today, it makes me smile because I've heard a lot of things that I've learned from, finding resources, learning your O&M, getting O&M training, gaining confidence in mobility, meeting different people who are confident and powerful in their disability, and seeing that maybe there is a pathway for myself. Where I work, like I said, for the city of for Recon Park in San Francisco, and I guess what I'm getting to is find your how, your why, and then you can figure out like how and what you're going to do. I found that I really liked working with people outside in nature, and my job is community gardens, urban agriculture. Like we do a lot of different things within that program. So some days I'm working with a group of kids planting seeds, and some days I'm leading volunteer groups like Twitter to pull weeds. And sometimes we're just hosting an event to give out soil. And you guys said something about success, and success is different for everybody, but just kind of having fulfillment and feeling like, okay, I went to work today. It felt good. I made an impact, a positive impact in the community, and, to leave, like you didn't just, pour all your heart and soul into your job and didn't get anything out of it, but to leave feeling good about yourself. So having all those trainings and going through those experiences has really helped me kind of gain this independence that I have. Knowing that, you are going to fall. I fall all the time in my job. We don't have like concrete pathways everywhere. I'm in parks and farms. So just being comfortable, but also just being hyper aware as much as you can. I know all our vision is different and unique, but just being willing to, I guess. And I forget who said it. But don't tell me what I can and can't do with my disability, because you should be in charge of what you ask for and be clear. Whether you're asking for directions, ask them how you need it, like tell them what you need. And if they don't provide it, then ask again, and to have your barrier of like, hey, I want to do that. It's, I can do it and I want to try it. And if you don't do a great job, like I said, I work for the city and they're super accommodating, which is wonderful because some private companies may not have to be as accommodating, but they're people first and they want me to be successful in my role. So, yeah, I don't know what else I should say, but that's what I got.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was amazing. I think, I think finding your why was so great. I think that's something that no one's touched on. I think that's so important and impactful in finding your success. So I think that's awesome. And then I think also, I still don't understand. I think it's amazing that you work in a new location all the time. I think transportation comes up a lot with work. So I think the fact that you have a new location to find every day is so wild, but impressive. Right? I'm like,
So it's wild. I love that. And I love that you get to be outside. Like that is, I always joke with people that I'm an outdoor cat, not an indoor cat. And so to be outside, I get that.
and to talk about like doing something new every day, that's really cool.
And also overwhelming, but like props to you because that's, everyone kind of learns what works best for them. And I think that's just so fantastic. And you said at your company, people first. And I think that's important too. Like, remember that when we're applying for a job, like we're applying, but we want to interview them too. Do we want to make sure that we're part of a company that's people first? Like 100%. Like we want to make sure that we love them as much as they love us, and it's going to be a good fit for both of us. And so I think that's something super important. A great takeaway that you said, Chris.
Yeah, totally. So again, I think finding your why, I think that's so great. I think there's so many pieces of that. Like it's like, work related and people, like finding your tribe, right, Terry? So I think, yeah, just finding what's going to make you happy is what's going to help you find success.
I love that. You just set that up for me perfectly. Okay, thanks. So the next section we want to cover is that sometimes you don't know, right? Sometimes you're kind of in that pivot of like, where am I going to go next? And that's 100% okay. And I think it's like, should you stay working like Jetta mentioned? Maybe. Or should you take a pause and kind of figure out what's next? Maybe. Everyone kind of has their own situation. And I think it's really important to kind of know what works, again, best for you, best for your family. And is it great to pause? Maybe. But we're going to shimmy over to Tim Johnson, who's going to kind of walk us through his journey.
Yeah, thank you. Should you work? No, absolutely not. Yeah, so my name's Tim. I came in from Charlotte. I've been effective for about 2 years. I'm from Portland, Oregon. Went to school at Pepperdine in California. Lived in New York City for 8-9 years before moving to Charlotte. I say all that because I think it's incredible. Like, just take something from someone, anyone you hear anyone say, a location, a place, school, and just start chatting about that. So, if any of that hit you, come find me. But yeah, I was affected 2 years ago. I was an actuary for 12, 13 years, which is it's risk management in the insurance field. I was a mathematics major. You go to school for actual science a lot of times, and then you're off to the races. We take 5 to 10 years worth of exams once you start working, and you study a lot, work a lot. I was a consultant in New York City for 8 years, and 70, 80 hours of work weeks sometimes, things like that. When I moved to Charlotte, slowed down a little bit, but I'm still in that real high, fast-paced financial world. And then I drove to work one day and couldn't read the computer. So just like a lot of you guys. And I was in a place where a very large, it's called an insurance company, reinsurance, but a very few amount of people and very specialized, and they didn't really know what to do with me, and I didn't know what to do with me either. Every other day was a different thing I could see. So it was hard to come by in terms of what really I could do on a daily basis. And so that's when they told me, well, that's what our short-term disability is for. So I went on that. Just FYI, I was 26 weeks. And then, I was told, we're paying you to be able to do a job, and you don't seem to be able to do it. So sorry, you guys got to go on long-term disability. And that's going to happen, you know what I mean? Especially in certain professions or certain jobs. And so I went on the long-term disability that was mentioned. And so just a quick shout out for that. Mine was in the employee package, which is, well, quite literally a lifesaver. But yeah, go check it out. If you don't know if it's in your package, if it's part of your yearly benefit sign up, that's my PSA for the group. I told that to my siblings for sure. So I will continue that. But I went on that, and also portion of it's covered by SSDI. So I also have that as well. Again, you can ask me about that. It does offset. But my first year was absolutely horrible. I was depressed, and you may have known me from shows like staying in bed till noon and not going anywhere and not talking to anyone. I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time, and I don't think I talked to an adult for months on end. It was bad, and certainly had given up on a lot of things. And then I just started listening to people around me. I got involved with a lot of different groups around me, a lot of church, workout groups. I mean, I could do 2 push-ups a year ago. I could barely run a quarter of a mile, and just kept saying yes to people around me that sounded like they knew what they were doing in their lives. And eventually just kept talking with people hearing what they had to say. A guy was a greeter at church for this huge church that I go to. He told me, why don't you start greeting at church? And I'm like, that sounds terrible because I can't see anyone's face until they're 2 feet away from me. And he's like, well, you know who else doesn't know anyone's name? Everyone else in this, no one remembers anyone's name. So you're not going to just keep introducing yourself and eventually you'll meet people. So I got over a small fear of that just by standing on a door and shaking their hands and saying, welcome to church. Started going to, I started listening to people, successful people. What do they do? Well, one guy I talked to says he gets up at 4:45. I started getting up earlier and earlier without my job. So I get up at 5 a.m. every day just because this guy seemed like he knew what he was doing, and I figured I'd give it a try. And I go to 5:30 in the morning workouts sometimes with my new good friend Chris, who's here, who lives down the street from me, and we found out 6 months ago, or 3 months ago even, through guess who, Lissa. And so we connect. We've gone out and done a few workouts in the morning. I mean, that's a blessing, guys. Like, it's a miracle that we can all get together like that. And I just started doing the good things, and all of that now has become my training for my next occupation. You know what I mean? Successful people get up early is what I was told for their job. They listen. They learn to help people. Someone told me, if you're depressed, not to make this a life lesson, but if you're depressed, if you're upset, if you're worried about being blind, go help someone else. In the work environment, think about the successful bosses you've had, servant bosses, servant leaders who look to help the people around them. So I started doing that. You don't need to be able to see is pick up a phone and call someone. Get some numbers here, call someone to see how they're doing, volunteer. Most importantly, to practice some of the things that I will do in my next job as I'm pivoting, as I'm thinking for the next thing. I help my own family. You know what I mean? Like, I do all the dishes. I do a lot of the cleaning. My wife drives me around and I'm a baby in the car. Like, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old and I am the most annoying one in the car because, I drove for so long. And you just got to say thank you sometimes. You know what I mean? Because those people do a lot for you. And so I am using all these skills I've never been happier in my entire life. And I could think of it as being blind, unemployed, poor, a pale redhead, whatever it is. Instead, I am lucky enough to get money to get me going so that I can figure out what I want to do next. And I was ashamed to ask people what they do for a living, not here, because you should feel comfortable around here, but I was jealous, ashamed, whatever the emotion would be, to ask my regular people in my life what they're doing, how are they doing it, why are they doing it, for who. Until recently, how am I ever going to personally get a new job, a new career? I'm going to do amazing things. I already know it. Our story is going to be written, but I need to learn from other people. So getting over that fear of, when someone says, what do you do? I'm not working right now. That's a pretty good answer. For me, that's what I'm doing. And hang in there. There is hope. And whether that's in life or in your job, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Woo! Anyone else motivated by that? Dang. That is awesome and so incredible. And I remember when I was talking to Tim a couple of weeks ago, and he had like kids screaming in the background, and he was just like calm as a cucumber. And I was like, wow, that's just such a balance. And as you're kind of sharing your story, there was a blog post that I wrote years and years ago when I was also in your spot of what do I do next? And the analogy I used was a diving board. You're like standing at the top of that diving board and you look down and you're like, oh God, it's so scary. You look up and you're like, oh God, that's so scary. But as you're on that diving board, you're kind of pivoting and you're kind of like jumping back and forth because you have to go down to go back up again. And that's exactly the story that I think of when you were telling your story, Tim. Just ready to make your next move to do something better and greater. I love it. Thank you.
So great. Thank you so much. So that concludes the list of people that we did have lined up, but we, as mentioned in the beginning, just wanted to make sure that we touched on a wide array of people in sort of a variety of lifestyles. So just please think of these people as resources. If you're interested in what someone's doing or has done, like find them, seek them out. So that was part of the big idea of trying to make sure that we get a huge range of people, where they're at, what they're doing, so that you can ask questions to these people that are around and when you're talking.
And I think one thing also, Julie, is that we were kind of, as we did the presentation last year with the employment panel, this was feedback we got, was like, I want to hear more. Give me some more diverse opportunities. Give me some other stories. So your feedback that you give us for conference is really important, because we definitely take that obviously to heart. And here we are today.
So on that note, we have some time for Q&A. So does anyone have any questions? Again, as mentioned, this can be for anyone that spoke. It can just be to the room. So if anyone has any questions for anyone based on everything they've heard.
My question is, some places of employment, once they see that you have this diagnosis and you're blind suddenly, is there an advocate that could reach out to HR or your employer if you start having trouble with them? Because of course there might be ADA rules and regulations they need to follow to accommodate you.
I actually don't know of like specifically of an advocate, so I'm just gonna kind of speak of the answer that I know of. But I would say it kind of depends on like where you are in your journey, especially if you're still in like independent living or voc rehab, being able to kind of have that advocate for specific counselors kind of depends on like, and even when Lucas was talking about like training and things like that, I would say depending on your journey, but like I unfortunately have been out of that for 10 years now. So I don't know who I would kind of turn to have that. I honestly would probably turn to this community and ask them questions. Shameless plug, I'd probably go to the employment call that happens, just because that's been my greatest resource of like, hey, I've had this issue at work. What do you guys think? And a lot of people on those calls have had the same thing happen to them and been able to kind of give me some guidance. But that's the answer I know. Anybody else know anything else?
Jessica?
Yes.
Hi, it's Jerry.
Yes, perfect.
There is an organization known as JAN, the Job Accommodation Network, and they do some very good work in that environment. So you could reach out to them. They have a website, and that's a very good resource to start with.
Thank you.
I think in my experience, it's been your state's commission for the blind. When I was starting 20 years ago, that they were really big on helping with that, and then, having me let them know if I needed anything, or that communication or advocacy or whatever. So, I mean, even start there.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay in touch with your organizations. Great question.
A lot of state organizations, the Department of Rehabilitations or whatever they're called in your state, can reopen your case, even if it's been closed, because now you need new accommodations, or you need that kind of advocacy in the workplace. And they can act, sometimes they can act, or vocational rehabilitation specialist or whatever they're called in your state, can act as that advocate that I think it was Linda was asking about. So check that.
Actually, part of that Ticket to Work program that I was speaking of before. So it's another resource.
Accommodation Network seems to have a website that is askjan.org. So
it's askjan.org. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ethan. So I was affected about 7 years ago now when I was 16. And I was kind of some of the situations, I think it was Sam, what you said, where like my whole trajectory at that point wasn't at all lined up with like, it didn't fit losing my vision at all. And I had no idea. So like, I kind of went to like a similar circumstance where like I hit rock bottom. And I'm at that point where like, I have a job, but it's not necessarily what I want to do. And I'm still trying to finish out college. At that standstill point where it's like, I can't seem to get a career job, because like right now I'm just working at Walmart trying to like finish through college, but I can't seem to get that career job, because whenever I end up like go into the interviews, they always end up seeing like my guide dog, then my blindness. And I'm like, well, you can't do this job. They don't directly say that, but that's what's implied. So I know if anyone has like any suggestions or like any different career fields, because I was in IT, but then my degree's in communication. So from there, it's like I can't seem to get into the field, if that makes sense. So I just kind of feel stuck. So I didn't know if anyone had any like recommendations.
This is probably a longer conversation, maybe next year, but I'm a big advocate for being self-employed, because then you don't have to try to convince somebody to give you accommodations. So just if anybody's wondered or thought about that, just to give you, I guess, hope and courage, that's what I do. I own my own business now, and in finance. And so But there's so many opportunities today with technology the way it is that you can do from home, self-employed. It might take some time to get the ball rolling, but once you do, you're your own boss. You control your schedule, your income, your accommodations, all that stuff. So that may not be the route you're looking for, but that is an option. Don't think it's not.
Okay, that's definitely something I've thought about because, like I said, like technology and finance was definitely the direction I was headed before I lost my vision. It was either that, or the military. So like, it's definitely something I'm open to.
Do you still have a lot of communication with your caseworker through the commission?
Once I got my job at Walmart, they basically were like, okay, we're done, and just kind of moved on. And they really haven't, I've tried reaching back out and they really haven't done anything when I've reached back out.
They're not done.
But it's like, that's the other issue. Is like, I need more resources, which is why, like, when everyone was talking, I was like, kind of felt like, I was like, oh, there's options, which was awesome hearing everyone's story. So I appreciate that.
One of the greatest things I think I would share is lean on your resources, like lean on this community, start asking those questions and being able to advocate for yourself. Start asking other people what questions you should ask or what should you push for, especially if that's not the job that you want to have. What do you want to do? And being able to even start networking around this community of like, what do you do for work? And just kind of learning and asking. I think that's great. And honestly, that's why we're here. That's why we're talking about it. So whatever we can do to help, join our employment call. There's a ton of different people with different jobs on there. And I think it's just kind of a good opportunity, but we'll happily keep encouraging you to push and advocate for yourself because you are your number one voice.
And this is Sarah Nappy. I wanted to speak to that as well. I learned about another resource if you want to remain in IT with a visual impairment. It's called NSITE. And they provide training in order to become CompTIA certified as a person with a vision impairment. It's specifically geared towards people with vision impairments becoming IT certified. And it's possible. It's really neat. You just have to, it's essentially, if you know the Microsoft platform going into the training, you can continue to do something in IT. So just wanted to connect you with that resource. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, question, and I don't know if this is for one of you two, Jetta, anyone who's like actively in a job, or I suppose like working with other people. That's kind of the question. And this is not necessarily a tech thing as much as it's like, you know, one thing that makes me nervous potentially is workshops in a group setting, you know, where you're writing on a whiteboard or you're presenting things or you're one-on-one at someone's computer looking at an Excel spreadsheet, you know, if anyone has any, you know, just maybe experience or thoughts of working with others when it's difficult to see the way they can.
I know you mentioned Jetta.
It's, oh, I got a mic. It's Jetta back here. I would just say that number one, you are your best advocate. And I used to be the type of person who was never an advocate for myself. And then I lost my vision, so I kind of had to be. But as far as like, if I'm ever going to a conference or a training, whether I want to or not, know that I need to speak up for myself. So I'll email the person who's handling that training and say, hey, I'm going to need some extra accommodations. They always usually work with me, send me a PDF ahead of time, or they'll make the PowerPoint accessible to me so I can manipulate it myself to what I need. If I'm ever going to a training with someone, or I actually do a lot of HR work myself, so I typically am the one training others. And I have found that it's always best to be upfront and honest about my situation. So when they come in and I am giving them a training, I'm like, listen, my computer screen's going to look really large, but I'm going to zoom in and out to accommodate you. And they're always like, no, you accommodate yourself, like, you know, but it's just, you have always got to be an advocate for yourself to speak up and know that, okay, hey, I'm going to need the additional support and here's how I need it. Sometimes you will be stuck in a meeting and you'll be like asked to write on the whiteboard and then you'll have to say, I'm not able to do that. And then sure enough, there will be someone in the room who will be like, oh, I got it for you. What do you want me to put down? So it is difficult, especially if I am normally introverted. So it is difficult to speak up for yourself, but it's always just most important. So, yep.
I was also going to say about the, just picking up on the zooming in and out thing. Have like people bring their laptop to my office and I start a Zoom call with them, and then they don't have to watch me zoom in and out because it just works that way. So there's like always little accommodations, and you work with the same people over and over, and then they just start to understand like some of those little things that you need, because you can't anticipate them all. It's not like when you get the job, it's like, all right, here's my list of 10 things that I need to accommodate. Sometimes it's like, this is an accommodation that I need to be on equal footing with like my coworkers. And one I thought of recently is I was on a work trip solo, and like if my colleagues who rent a car can like visit their friends or family in those communities, I'm like, well, I'm just going to pay for the $50 Lyft ride down to Oakland so I can visit my friend, because my colleagues that like could drive a car would just get in their car and drive down there. So I'm going to do this because it puts me on equal footing with other people, sort of deal. So it's like, the accommodations and the things that you need, there's not a list that you start with. There's a list that's constantly evolving. You just have to communicate, even for shy people.
I would add to the like preparation, just being the condition that we have. Yes, it makes things harder. And part of that is you got to practice more, and you got to prep more, and you got to think through it, and you got to plan through it and do some research. I give lectures and presentations to rooms of prospects. I give sales presentations a few times a month, and I've adapted and learned over the years. I'll tell people right up front, like, you just kind of got to put it out there. Number one, if you're giving a seminar presentation and somebody raises their hand and you're just constantly ignoring them, they don't like that. So that's why I've learned, just tell them and then make a joke about it. And it's great. And they like you and they feel more connected to you. Like, just a lot of benefits to that. Just say, hey, I tell them a couple of housekeeping things. I'm legally blind. I can tell you more about it afterwards if you want to ask what it is. But I tell you that so you know, if you're raising your hand for a question, I'm not going to see it. I'm not being a jerk, at least not right now. And I say, if you've got a question, just interrupt me. It's okay. Just say, hey, John, and ask me a question. And then I move on. And they're great. And then I do a lot of meetings over Zoom and remote. What I learned with Zoom early on, why I used that over WebEx or Teams or whatever, is because when you magnify, at least me on a Mac, when I magnify my screen, they don't see that on their screen when I'm sharing my screen. It doesn't transfer that. Or audio, if I'm doing voiceover, it doesn't have to translate your computer audio or transmit. So just those are kind of the things I've figured out.
First off, thank you, everyone. This is my first conference, and just the resources, the networking is just fabulous. So thank you for everyone. I've owned my own agency, sales agency, for 20 years. I lost my vision about 5 years ago. And the biggest thing for me was fear, not staying employed. Being my own boss, it was nice. I didn't have to report to anyone, do anything but my problem was, how am I going to work? I'm a salesman. I have to drive. I can't drive no more. I have to talk to customers. I can't read a catalog. I can't do presentations. So one of the things I learned to do was adapt. When I knew I was going to call on a customer, I knew exactly what products they would have. So I would study the catalog the night before. I would color code different sections of the catalog. So I knew if they were talking about drill bits, I knew to go to the blue page. If they were talking about tape measures, I went to the yellow page, and I pulled it off. They actually like, what's the problem? I'm like, why are you got all these color coded? Then I would say, I'm legally blind. And then they changed their tune. They were like, oh my God, let me help you. So it went from me being embarrassed by fear, facing it, to them accepting me. So a lot of things are just a lot of research. Even I'm a lot of social too. So we do a lot of entertaining, going to restaurants. I had the fear. I got a customer in front of me. I'm trying to pull off that I can't see. And I'm looking at the menu. He said, what do you order? And I'm like, not for sure. So the night before, I'd download the menu. I'd study it. I already knew what the menu was. So I'm pulling it off. I'm ordering whatever I want. And he's like, man, I thought you couldn't see. I didn't tell him I studied it the night before. But also too, in sporting events, I love sports. And I'd always go to sporting events and I always look at people, why are they having headphones on? You're at the game. Why are you listening to a game? Well, for years, I've had season tickets to a lot of events. And every time a play would happen, I'm waiting for everybody else. Did they score? Or my buddy goes with me. He's like, will you shut up? Yes, they scored. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know. So I adapted. I start listening to the radio. I'm listening to it live. I can kind of see it, but I'm listening to it live. I know the play. So they call a foul. I know who it's on. My buddy's like, now they're asking me questions. Who got fouled? So one of the things that really helped me is learning to adapt. My biggest thing for employment was fear, anxiety, being embarrassed of telling someone that I'm legally blind. How am I going to continue to work? So I just learned to adapt. Again, study a little bit before, color code pages, listen to it on the radio when you go to a game. But again, I appreciate everyone here.
Yes, this is Ethan again, and kind of going along the same lines of learning to adapt. Before, like, I did an internship like a year or two after I lost my vision with a major HR software company. And to me, it was crazy just seeing like how everything ran remotely. But even like when I was in meetings, like I was on the accessibility software team of the company, so like they all understood it. But I get put in meetings with like directors from like different companies outside that were looking at buying our software, and they would have me run the meetings. And the first time they told me that, I looked at my boss and I was like, I'm not sure if I'm the right person for this. And she's like, nah, you'll be fine. Like I have to go to this different meeting. I was like, well, here we go. So like the first meeting I ran, I just opened it with, hey, I'm legally blind. If you have any questions about the software page, like just tell me exactly where on the page it's at. And like since then, like I saw how well it worked, and just being upfront and honest, like everyone else has said, like being kind of owning it like upfront, like makes it a little bit easier. Because then if they have questions, you can be like, oh, like I'm not sure where on the page you're talking about, like where are you looking at? And then they'll describe it a little bit more in depth. And it works. I've learned that works in other aspects of like of life. Whenever people are trying to ask me a question at work, I'm like, well, where are you trying to look? And so I'm blind, I can't see it. So like just getting that extra little bit of detail on the front end has been really instrumental in a lot of like my career choices I've made so far. It's just asking for more detail up front.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for your questions. I feel like we could continue for a very long time. I feel like there's so many questions about everyone and how they do everything. So it can just continue on and on to tonight and to tomorrow. So thank you everyone who shared. Thank you everyone for your questions. We really appreciate your time.
One more round of applause for all of our presenters. Thank you guys so much. Like, thanks for jumping up and sharing your stories. We really appreciate it. And huge thanks to Julie for tag teaming me with me up here. I couldn't have done it without her. So thank you to Julie.